Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to you all and to our audience on live stream. It's a pleasure to be co-hosting this event with Deputy Carolyn Labey, Minister for International Development and also Deputy for Greville, Deputy Judy Martin, Minister for Social Security. Today we wish to celebrate the extension to Jersey of the Convention of the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women and girls, otherwise known as CEDAW. And we're really honoured to be joined by Baroness Berridge, Minister for Women in the United Kingdom, who will be joining us on screen, Her Excellency Yamina Karitanyi, Rwandan High Commissioner to the UK, and Dragan Nastic, a senior representative from UK Unicef. I recognise several familiar faces in the audience, but for those of you who I do not know, my name is Lisa Springate and I'm chair of the Institute of Directors here in Jersey. And in my day role, I head up the legal and technical team at Jersey Finance, the promotional body for the island. Prior to that, I was a partner in a local law firm practicing in commercial litigation for over 25 years. CEDAW is a core United Nations human rights treaty and requires countries to eliminate discrimination against women and girls in all areas of life. It promotes equal rights for women and girls and is often described as the International Bill for Women. Earlier this year, this important international treaty was extended to Jersey, and this really does mark an important milestone for the island and is a public commitment by our government towards eliminating discrimination against women and girls. Just before we move on to the panel session, which will last for approximately 40 minutes, followed by a Q&A session, I'm delighted that we'll be hearing first from Deputy Martin and then Baroness Berridge. There will then be a premiere of the Women in Jersey video, which has been a really excellent collaboration between those that's been involved, before we hear from Deputy Carolyn Labey and Her Excellency. I'd like to begin by welcoming warmly to the stage Deputy Judy Martin. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. I'm Judy Martin and I'm very happy to be hosting this event today. Co-hosting actually. I've been a working mother for over 40 years, the last 20 of which I've been a member of the States Assembly. During those 20 years as a States member, I've held many roles, but the last 3 years as a member of the government, I've been the Social Security Minister. Being a States member is a very flexible role which has enabled me to work from home for many years and has provided a great opportunity to manage a young family with a busy workload. I would really encourage anybody who's thinking about it to put your name forward. Next year is the elections and try a life in Jersey politics. As the Minister for Social Security, my portfolio includes responsibility for helping people in Jersey to achieve and maintain financial independence, supporting employment, promoting diversity, equality and social inclusion, providing pensions and in old age and other financial safeguards to the most vulnerable in our community. We need to carry on changing attitudes, and I believe this will start. It needs to start with education and more education and more education. Some elements we already have underway. I want to share with you some of the achievements here in Jersey. The most significant step in recent years has to be introduce the discrimination law. In 2015, we extended the scope of this law to include discrimination based on sex, pregnancy and maternity, sexual orientation and gender reassignment. The family-friendly employment followed. Both these laws enabled us to fulfil our long-standing commitment to participate in CEDAW. Living up to that commitment means promoting equality in everything we do. Our family-friendly laws came into full force in July 2020. This means mum and dad can both take up to a year over the first 2 years of baby's life. At the same time, we also introduced breastfeeding breaks into the employment law. And in January this year, we extended the parental benefits from 18 weeks to 32 weeks. I am proud of the work we've done to secure these changes. I think it will help parents. It is early days, and I will be watching to see how they make a real difference to families in Jersey. Other ministers are also making progress. Education will increase free preschool nursery hours from this September, from 20 hours to 30 hours. And the Home Affairs Minister is working to introduce new legislation on domestic abuse and crimes of prejudice that tackle violence against women. There is more to be done. We must continue working together to eliminate all forms of discrimination against women. We are committed to the CEDAW Convention, which will help shape our future. Thank you. And I'd now like to hand over to Baroness Berridge, the UK Minister for Women.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm really sorry that I haven't been able to take up your invitation in person. It was to be my first trip out of the UK since the beginning of the pandemic, and Jersey has a real special place in my heart. I have enjoyed many a visit to St. Juan, walking across that beach, and enjoyed many a New Year's Eve with Faulkner Fisheries on the food on the table. So it is a real sadness to me that I haven't been able to come today due to a notification only last night in relation to a potential contact that I've seen this week. So I'm really very sorry, and particularly I'm delighted to speak before Deputy Labey, who I've met on numerous occasions due to Commonwealth links as well. So I hope in the future to be able to come once again to Jersey. And it's great to celebrate with you only virtually that you have now committed to CEDAW. So what does that mean for Jersey? It means several things. Firstly, it means, of course, as has just been outlined by Deputy Martin, that you've made incredible progress in achieving gender equality and are ready for this to be acknowledged. Secondly, that you are committed to continuing to make progress, and importantly, that you are not afraid of this to be scrutinised as in the 4-year cycle. And thirdly, we now speak with an even more shared language about women and girls. We know that what these rights are, and we acknowledge that these rights must be respected. So the convention is a powerful thing. And so it's really great news that CEDAW has now been extended to Jersey. Like Florence Boot, one of the island's daughters, she also understood the importance of supporting women and girls. As she, with her husband, grew Boots to be the successful company that we know it today, she ensured, though, that young people, including girls, committed to continue to receive an education. She was a keen campaigner for the right of women to access higher education and founded the first female Hall of Residence at the University of Nottingham. In the UK and in Jersey, we are emerging from the pandemic, and my thoughts are with all of those who've been affected by this. Many, of course, are still having the effects of long COVID, and many, of course, have been bereaved. But women have also been on the front line. They've been the backbone of our healthcare provision. They've stepped in to educate in the home, their children, and cared for the vulnerable. And much of this has entailed real challenges and indeed some significant negative effects. The closure of schools and childcare had a significant impact on mothers, who still provide a much greater share of unpaid care in our societies. And unfortunately, rates of domestic violence sadly increased. And because of the sectors women tend to work in, more women than men have been furloughed to date. We have supported women through this crisis of COVID-19, and we must continue to do so. But more than this, we must ensure that they're at the heart of the recovery. We mustn't lose the progress that we've made over recent years. And now that you two have ratified the convention, I know you're committed to this and you have the tools to do so. So I wish you all the best. And again, thank you so much for letting me share this day with you. And we'll now have the video, the first showing of the video highlighting women in Jersey.
I'd say growing up, there was definitely a sense of expectation of how I would be as I got older and how I was supposed to act. As a slightly older girl and growing into a woman, I'd say there's probably an element of your body being watched and yourself being watched, and sort of a feeling of quite a lot of expectation again, and sometimes pressure, unfortunately.
The first time I was aware of an issue of being a woman in Jersey was back in 2000, when I became pregnant with our first child, and the maternity leave arrangements then were diabolical. I would have ended up with about 6 weeks or 8 weeks off. And that was when it first struck me that things in Jersey are different for women, and it's not fair. Since that time, I've become more aware of the difficulties caused by the lack of role models for women, particularly in senior positions. So it's very hard to aspire to be something if you can't see somebody else being it.
In my paid roles, gender pay gap and fewer opportunities for promotion and leadership roles, and sexual assault. A lot of senior positions are dominated by men. You see few women. I'm in the charity sector, and you see an awful lot of women in the lower paid and lower kind of less responsible positions, and board members and trustees are mainly men.
We know that there are not many women in skilled positions, and also in terms of directors, CEOs, although we know that there are a high proportion of women who go back to work. That doesn't balance out against the people who've got authority and who are leading companies. So it's an interesting perspective to look at it, because there's not a balance and there's certainly not equality.
But what is clear is that there is a sense of feeling that discrimination still exists. We can see it in the absence of women in the leadership positions with the most highest roles. So I guess one thing that is really obvious is the change in tax laws. That is really key. So it's pleasing to see that that is changing.
The fact that there is a high proportion of mums who go back to work in difficult times when childcare is very, very expensive, the fact that the parenting law has now come in will help with that. And that's a good move, because I do believe things are moving forward. I think we need to have more women in the States, because women need a voice. And only when women have a voice can they make a difference.
I'm very fortunate my States member is a woman and is a great strength and a great role model, but there are very few of those. And it becomes hard, I think, for people to challenge the existing status quo.
As you go through life, I became aware of all the things that would impact me as a woman.
That's how you measure a good community, by valuing children. In order to do that, you have to value women and you have to value families. And that, for me, is absolutely key. And that's how we should be measured.
The biggest support is other women. I think if other women reach out and befriend and offer mentorship informally, and that's certainly been my experience.
I think other strong women are the support. So my peers in the professional and parental life.
There's more of an open space and people can come forward about their experiences a lot more easily these days.
In education in particular, it's pleasing to see that there are attempts to address the gender pay gap, but they are pretty small, and much more needs to be done in terms of addressing that. There are a number of networks that support women and give them the allyship that they sometimes miss out on, and they break the tyranny of the old boys network. But it would still be great to see more women represented in every walk of life and at every level.
We need to take this convention, help it underpin all that we do and all that we are, and then we can make changes that are proactive.
CEDAW is a great document because it brings out into the open how far we've come. There's a lot in there, but it also raises the issues that we aren't doing and brings those out into the public domain.
And I hope it will raise the visibility of the issues and discrimination faced by women and girls in Jersey. I hope it will inspire people to take action.
I hope it will act as a sort of point of reference for everyone and inspire people to talk about things and to make them better.
There are positive steps that can be taken to ensure greater representation of women as well, and that's a real positive.
And then when it underpins all that we can do, we can be proud and say we are working to the new convention. And this is what it means for our island. And this is what it means for our children.
How powerful that was to hear of the experiences of women in the island. I think we can be proud of what we've achieved so far. And I'm certainly very proud of the excellent progress made by Deputy Martin and the State's Assembly in approving family-friendly legislation. But we must agree that our work in achieving equality and ending discrimination is far from done. This is why the ratification of CEDAW is important. Signing up at last represents an important milestone in ending discrimination against women. It sends a signal about our intentions, and the convention will be a vital framework to guide our work and policy making. But it also places our own efforts into context of the global struggle to end discrimination against women. Jersey now stands alongside 189 other countries who have ratified this agreement since 1979. I was 19 then. Just imagine how our community would look now had we been in a position to ratify it then. And the international perspective is important for two reasons. First, linking Jersey's journey towards women's rights and empowerment and the journey of other countries helps us benchmark our progress and highlights where we can do better. CEDAW joins us to an international conversation and an international standard. We can be complacent sometimes and slow, but in every field, economic, social, political, judicial, marital, educational, Jersey can do better. And that doesn't mean looking at countries such as Norway or New Zealand. I'm privileged to be sharing a stage with Her Excellency Yamina Karitanyi, whose country leads the world in the representation of women in public life, not just in politics, but in key jobs across the economy. And furthermore, women have constitutional rights to equal pay. Rwanda has achieved this, not like Jersey, after 76 years of peace and prosperity, but only 27 years after one of the worst genocides in history. We can learn a lot from Rwanda, and we do, thanks to our close engagement in many areas, and not least dairy farming and in financial inclusion. And this is the second reason that the international context which CEDAW gives us is so important. Efforts to eliminate discrimination against women are a global struggle, not just a series of national ones, and Jersey is very proud to play its part as a good global citizen in making the world a better place for women everywhere. Jersey's International Development Programme places women at the centre of its work. Projects began this year will reach more women than are in Jersey. We focus especially on smallholder dairy farmers, many of whom are women, and on women living in threatened ecosystems. We also focus on bringing basic financial services to poor women, including microcredit, micro-savings and micro-insurance. Our projects also work to teach women their rights, give them a political voice, and reduce sexual and gender-based violence. We are honoured to work together with partner countries like Rwanda and the UK in these global efforts. And actually, our international development work teaches us a lesson that we would do well to internalise in Jersey, and it is this: that economically and socially empowered women participating equally in public life and living without fear of discrimination or violence are the prime movers of a nation's success. CEDAW shows us what's possible, what's still to do, and emphasises that our efforts are not conducted in a vacuum, but as part of a global family of nations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for those very kind words, Deputy Carolyn Labey. Honorable ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I wish to start by thanking the Government of Jersey for this kind invitation to attend today's event. It is an honor to be with you in person to celebrate the extension of the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And just this morning, I had the great honor to visit the Jersey College for Girls. And I must tell you that you have many more leaders, women leaders, that are coming up. So you must be proud of yourselves. And let me congratulate Jersey for embracing CEDAW. As Rwandans, we inherited a wounding history, which resulted in the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994, which stole the lives of innocent Rwandan children, men and women, destroyed the country's limited infrastructure, and shook the very core of our society. Thankfully, 27 years later, we are now firmly on our onward journey to healing, rebuilding, and developing our nation, and we are doing so with a renewed sense of hope and resilience. To quote His Excellency, President of the Republic of Rwanda, President Paul Kagame, women and men are equal in terms of ability and dignity. And they should also be equal in terms of opportunity. As Rwandans and as a global community, we need every member of our society to use his or her talent to the fullest. What the President understood was that 51% of our population could not be ignored. And this recognition of our leadership, of the need for parity, was our early success. Today, gender equality is one of the fundamental principles guiding Rwanda's constitution. Rwanda's Vision 2050 and our national strategy for transformation has solidified gender equality as one of our main aspirations for national transformation and prosperity. That vision puts emphasis on women's access to finance, creation of decent jobs, scaling up early childhood development, fighting gender-based violence, human trafficking, and strengthening institutions that promote gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. Rwanda has ratified international and regional commitment on gender equality, including CEDAW, Beijing Platform for Action, Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa, and the He for She commitment, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, in the 2021 annual Global Gender Gap Report, Rwanda ranked 7th globally in having closed its gender gap. Rwanda has consistently had the highest female representation of parliamentarians in the world since 2003, currently standing at 61.3%, and we are also proud that 50% of our cabinet and 44% of our judiciary are women. We are also proud of the gender gap parity in our schools, with girls' enrollment standing at 49.5% versus 50.5% of males in primary school, but rising at 53.3% in secondary for girls. In order to achieve the gender statistics we are discussing today, significant advances must continue to be made to ensure a legal framework that is favorable for women, for their maximum protection and empowerment, including the prohibition of any form of gender-based violence, punishment of household and gender-based violence, as well as equal rights to land and, of course, equal pay. In 2020, women-only land ownership was higher than men-only by 10%, with 38% of women accessing credit by using land as collateral. The COVID-19 pandemic has, of course, forced our institutions to react and act swiftly to reprogram many gender-related projects with an intensified focus on economic recovery and access to finance. We also know that there's still much work to be done and have identified key areas to act on, such as bringing the gender divide in ICT, STEM, and technical vocational educational programs. So Rwanda witnessed the devastating impact of divisive leadership in the past, but we are now proud to have a people-centered, inclusive approach to governance and a consensus-building method where gender equality is at the core of the country's political values and principles. Rwanda considers it a duty to share our story and experiences with others, and by exchanging best practices, our successes as well as failures, we can achieve more as we work towards a common and fairer future for all. So a happy day to all of us, and I look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
If I could invite the panelists to the stage, thank you. To you, Dragan. That one, Dragan. My sincere thanks to you all and to Baroness Berridge for those really insightful feedback from you all in terms of your own perceptions on this celebration of the signing up to CEDAW. The first part of this panel event is in terms of personal reflections, and having watched the video and seen from a real range of ladies on that video in terms of what it's like being a woman in Jersey, we thought it would be helpful to hear from the panellists in terms of what's their own experiences of being a woman, and in terms of what progress have we made over the last 40 years since CEDAW was signed up, So, Baroness, could I start by you, with you, please, asking you in terms of what are your own experiences having been in the UK, at the bar in the UK and subsequently?
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was really interesting to hear everybody's speeches. I do want to start from a point of view that I do feel grateful. You know, it's not obviously a perfect picture in the UK, and we've got progress to make. But when I reflect of the particular time in the history of my country when I'm born, you know, when I've been born, I do actually feel very grateful for that. You know, it is open to me to be a barrister, to own property, to start a company, to be involved in charitable work. That's not to say there aren't barriers there, but I do feel incredibly grateful for that. I also think, you know, having gone from law into politics, you know, that I've seen quite a lot of change when I first went into politics, which was just over 10 years ago. There were fewer women who were there, and fewer younger women. When I joined the House of Lords, I was the youngest woman, and the average age is still 70. So, you know, it was quite a challenge there. But, and I think on my part, I do think also as well what was demanded of me was quite a lot of insight into other people's lives. So, you know, a lot of colleagues I first met, when they were at university, there were no women there. So it was a real anathema to them to have to hold a conversation with a woman about something to do with work. And that was just quite surprising. But I think there have been quite a lot of changes. And so I'd say that my workplace is a better place to be a woman now, and I really enjoy that. But I do think there are barriers, and I think particularly in the UK, women who have sometimes a double discrimination, as in if you're a woman from a particular background or you're from a minority community, you'll also face additional challenges, as we've all seen with movements like Black Lives Matter.
Thank you. Your Excellency, can I hear your experiences of a woman in terms of your background and sort of growing up as a woman in your country?
Well, I didn't touch on the challenges. For us, the challenges were even beyond gender. The challenge were very much to do with insecurity and war and genocide, which only add so much complexity to this issue. But I must say that the beauty of that experience is the appreciation of what then is needed to create an inclusive society. And I am just grateful that we have a country, a nation, a leadership that wants just that, to be able to quickly pick up the pieces and use everyone, men, women, young people, to achieve our goals and really take stock and regain the time we've lost in the conflict. It is not easy, of course, because when you look at a country that has emerged from genocide, and I'm talking 27 years ago, so it's quite recent history. You have challenges. The survivors need help, they need assistance. You have to reunite a country and give it a sense of nationhood as you move forward. But there again, I think the success here has been that call to women as well to join this very important objective. And so they were embraced, maybe easier than other places that have the luxury of not embracing women. So out of dark places, sometimes you do emerge if you do it right. But it is not easy because, like I said, on top of the challenge of war, insecurity, genocide, you still a woman. So you have to raise a family in those circumstances. But it has been a journey that has now been embraced by all. I often say that women cannot make it without, one, the political drive, and two, the drive of men. Because we cannot underestimate the power that men have in changing the status quo. And we must invite them to the table. Not fight them, invite them. Because I want to believe that we have many more who are positive about about gender parity. They are fathers, they are husbands, And they would want to see that emerge faster for the benefit of societies.
Thank you. Deputy Martin, closer to home. In terms of growing up in the UK and then coming over to Jersey, what's your experiences having had that contrast?
Yeah, the contrast was because when I came to Jersey 35 years ago, I brought a 6-year-old son, and that was hard enough in it with all the different things, but I had sorted all that out. But I really noticed it more. When he was 11, I was expecting my second baby, and the maternity was non-existent. There was no legislation where I worked, and basically they said, oh, you're pregnant, nice, when are you leaving? So you're like, whoa. And I contacted a sitting states member, Senator Corrie Stein, and she said there was a code of practice. Well, that was 2000. And obviously code of practice, if you're a good employer, it works. If not, and over time it had to come in, but it was slow. Things put us back in the mid-90s, the 2000, 2008, 9, should have done a lot more. But Susie Pinnell, when she was at Social Security, brought the first bit in, and then it went from nothing good to one of the best in Europe. I mean, that 2 years is fantastic.
So really positive, actually, for
yeah,
Ireland.
you don't lose you leave your job and you take that year out. Your job is there when you go back. So we hope it will also, empower women and to go back into the workplace at that level, so you don't lose anything. And I think that might help with the gender pay gap as well.
Yeah, no, very much indeed. And Deputy Labey, in terms of you grew up in Jersey, what's your experiences as a woman growing up here?
Well, I grew up, I come from a farm, but from very early on, I grew up in an all-women household with my mother and my 2 sisters. I went to an all-girls school, so probably my encounter with any form of discrimination was in the workplace, when I hit the workplace, and I was affronted with sexual harassment, crass comments, sexual innuendo, that sort of thing that you could only raise your eyes up at. There was nothing to protect or sort of rein anybody in. It was okay, but you had to put up with it. But it only really affected me, a bit like Judy, when I was first pregnant with my daughter, and you had to fight for pregnancy leave. Really fight, and I remember I was a manager in one of the big 4 accountancy practices, and my colleague, who was male, wanted to go on a 6-month sabbatical, and I wanted 6 months off maternity leave. He sailed through that and got promoted when he came back, and I was fighting, are you really coming back? Shouldn't you be making your mind up which you want, a career or...
So some real challenges, but there's also some positives, because when we look at the landscape now for working women and going back to work, there are obviously been quite a huge change and a huge shift in terms of moving forward that dial. And actually on that point, Mr. Nastic, that's one thing I'd like to perhaps hear your thoughts on in terms of over your career and your life. In terms of how would you describe the change that you've seen in terms of gender equality and the benefits which this has brought about, not only to the economy, but also to society as well?
Thank you. This is the first time I am talking, so hello to everyone. I'm delighted to be with you today. I thank the government of Jersey for inviting me, and congratulations on ratifying this important UN Human Rights Treaty. For me, I work for the UK Committee for UNICEF, which is an integral part of the United Nations Children's Fund. For me, the most important change and progress to mention is the fact that we have now a common standard for the whole of the international community, that men and women are equal. Gender equality is the principle codified in the UN Charter. There is a legal obligation on every UN member state to work towards full realization of the rights of girls and women. For the first time in the history of the world, we live in the time when there is a truly universal human rights system. Universal in the sense that it applies to every country in the world, and universal in the sense that it applies to every one of us, because every one of us is born equal in our dignity and human rights. And I am proud to be working for UNICEF because gender equality underpins everything we do in our programmatic and advocacy work. The purpose of every one of our projects is empowering girls and women. I would like to use this opportunity to thank the Government of Jersey for supporting UNICEF for more than 20 years and giving us resources to undertake projects around the world, like in Nepal, benefiting directly girls and women. If you ask me to be pragmatic and to tell you from the practical point of view, well, girls and women realizing their full potential and rights benefits all of us. And that society is then stronger and socially more cohesive. I would like to finish with this thought for you. Gender equality is morally right and legally binding, but it is also pivotal to achieving sustainable development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nastic. Now, we've looked at sort of personal perspectives, and I'd now like to move the panel session on to current challenges in terms of what are the key sort of issues for gender equality when we look at the UK, Rwanda and Jersey. So, Baroness Berridge, if I could start with you, please, first, in terms of what are the key issues for gender equality from your perspective in the UK, in your leading role?
Yeah, I think one of the, if I start with a sort of negative, which has been what I raised in the speech about the rise in domestic abuse. We've just passed, Domestic Abuse Act for the first time, recognising it's not just violence, it is abuse and it's economic abuse. I think that is one of the key things in terms of, women being able to fulfil their full potential in the workplace and socially and in their whole lives. If you're in that abusive situation, then that's obviously going to hold you back, and we need to ensure that, it's appropriately criminalised and that the support services are there. So that's one of the major things. One of the other things in the role I've been really surprised to be profiling is actually, although we've got some of the highest levels pre-pandemic of employment, and particularly full-time employment of women in the UK, we have seen that they are overrepresented in certain sectors and underrepresented. When one looks at we were just talking about the sustainable development, when one looks at the net zero challenges that we're all going to face, technology and science is going to be at the forefront of that. And the challenge for us in the UK is that we don't have enough women and girls studying STEM subjects, and that we've really been trying to do a push to ensure that women go into those apprenticeships or technical qualifications that actually can see women's highly skilled and actually in many occasions earning more than somebody who's got the undergraduate degree. So and also we just need to ensure that girls are doing maths, physics, chemistry as well at A level for the academic route as well. So I've had some really wonderful roundtables profiling women in construction, women in technology. I think that's one of the key things for gender parity that we need to look at in the UK.
Thank you, Baroness. Your Excellency, what are the key issues from your perspective?
I think it's what we've heard so far, and I would just summarize it into 2 points. One, going back to CEDAW and looking at the treaty and tackling all the problems that are in there, and tasking government to then respond accordingly with implementing methods that are realistic. And the second, back to the minister's speech, education, education, education. If we educate the young girls, it would be impossible with the right environment. So tackling the gender-based violence that was talked about it would be impossible to stop them because the environment would be right and they'll be equipped with education that could then take them forward.
And Deputy Martin, is there anything you'd like to add to that, or in terms of from?
Yeah, it is education, and you've got to do it very young, and it's both genders, and how you know how a boy deals with his sister. I mean, because it's been years and years and years, and the money is sent to Women's Rescue, putting in laws, but that's like that's when they've gone over the you know, they've gone over the cliff. Then the money needs to be here right from young, and then if somebody has, you know, I was trying to find, I think we've got very small bits here where we try and work with men who really want to be worked with because they have, you know, they don't want to be violent, they don't want to lose it. Then you find out some of that's taught, it's been in a family trait. Yeah. I'm not saying all, but yeah, there's a lot more to it. And unfortunately,
trying to break that cycle.
It's been going on for years, and if you don't deal with the young and keep doing it there, sometimes it's much too late.
No, very good points. Yeah. And Deputy Labey, would you like to elaborate at all anymore, or do you think we've covered those items that you'd like to
I
promote?
think it's education, and I'm very encouraged. I chair the CPA and chair the Youth Assembly, and I'm truly encouraged by the participation, the confidence of the young people coming up through our education, as Yamina experienced this morning. And so I am encouraged. It is education, but I am encouraged of what's coming up in the next generation.
Thank you. And Mr. Nastic, in terms of, we've heard in terms of how it's important for everyone to play their part in terms of, you know, the role of men and boys and sort of, you know, really educating from a very young age in terms of, so it's kind of not, you know, sort of thought as anything completely different. You know, what's your perspective on that?
Well, when girls and women exercise their rights, that benefits all of us. Healthy, educated, skilled girls and women can come together with boys and men to build better families, communities, and nations. UNICEF believes that men and boys not only can, but should support girls and women in exercising their rights. Let me give you an example of how we do that. UNICEF runs a global program called Rights Respect in Schools, where children in primary and secondary schools learn about human rights and the fact that they are rights holders. But not only that, they learn that their peers are rights holders and that they need to respect that. And boys also learn that their behavior and attitude matters and that they must support girls in enjoying their freedoms and rights. This program is a great success actually here in Jersey, thanks to the generous support from the Children's Commissioner for Jersey. 36 schools in Jersey are now affiliated to the UNICEF Rights Respect in Schools program. Independent evaluation of that program in other countries where it has been going on for decades shows that this kind of education, not just formal but informal, in kind nurturing values and culture, leads to better behavior and even educational results. So I have no doubt that in the long term, the rights respect in schools will have a great positive impact here in Jersey as well.
Thank you. Now, we've all, ladies and gentlemen, experienced an exceptional few months. We really have, in terms of these have been exceptional and unprecedented times. But there are some positives to come out of the last few months, and we've seen an acceleration both in relation to the environment, sustainability, technology and innovation, but also in relation to diversity and inclusion. Although I was on a panel session recently where there was a really good debate about, have we moved back though? Has the dial gone back or has it gone forward actually as a result of the pandemic? Baroness Berridge, could I ask your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yes, I mean, we've seen, undoubtedly the pressure on women, that women, as I said, have been at the forefront of caring responsibilities and at the forefront of educating children at home. We are keen, though, to not lose ground, but we have seen that more women have been furloughed from their jobs than men. But there has been quite a high profile, though, when we think about the success of the vaccine programme. There's been so many women who've been involved in that, and Kate Bingham and others. So I don't know if anybody saw the, I think it was a BBC Panorama programme. I know that men commented, there's all these women at the forefront of doing this. So I think women in science and women obviously make up the majority of the workforce in the National Health Service. I think that's been a really high profile, and I hope that that is going to inspire girls to, as I say, get involved in those subjects. One of the key things we're also trying to do in the UK, though, is increase the ability of people to study part-time and to study outside of the sort of 3-year undergraduate degrees. So we're looking at bringing forward legislation to make the sort of loan entitlements a lifelong loan entitlement. And I think that'll help a lot of women who might want to study part-time around other responsibilities, and that should enable them to skill up and get the technical qualifications often that they need to get the higher paid jobs.
No, I mean, it's such a good point, Baroness, in terms of we've, again, just looking more positively at the last few months, in terms of we have seen those role models really come to the fore, and actually quite different styles of leadership we've seen as well from what we've seen in the past in terms of the stereotypes of leadership. Your Excellency, what's your thoughts? Do you think we've taken a step back, or do you think we've taken a step forward as a result of the last few months with the pandemic?
I want to focus on the positive, and the positive is we've demystified working from home. So I think that will be positive for women who now can fight back and get that flexibility that is so required in certain situations. And this doesn't apply to women only; it applies to men. But of course, we must then look at what have we lost in terms of time and focus in terms of women-specific projects and attention. So we did, I think, exhaust the issue of gender-based violence. We've seen that come to a rise, and other social needs that have to be quickly tackled so that we don't lose too much. But of course, we've lost in terms of economic gain, and that applies to women. But I'm just excited about that point of flexibility, and if we can further capitalize on that, we will have resolved at least some of the challenges.
It's such a good point, though, because I think there were the cynics that sort of before the pandemic, in terms of this flexibility, that felt very much that everybody had to be seen in the office between 8 and 6. But it's right, though, we have really road tested it. We've really proved, actually, that if anything, we've seen sort of perhaps teams even working better and more productively over that course. Now, I'd like to, ladies and gentlemen, and the audience on live stream, I'd like to move on to the third section of this panel session, which is looking at the role of CEDAW in reducing discrimination against women. So, Baroness, could I ask you, please, how does CEDAW help to progress the work on eliminating discrimination against women and girls? Thank you.
I think it's really important, obviously. It provides a base, it provides the legal framework that governments are holding themselves to account on, and therefore then the population can look to it. And as I briefly alluded to, it's a 4-year sort of progress report, and it's the benchmarking that's there. So it gives that, as other speakers have said too, when you had a code of practice that's now become domestic law. It is now about your government saying, we are going to hold ourselves to account on this, our populations can, and also we can look at other countries. So it has been quite a means of driving forward the progress that we've made, and it's opening yourself up to scrutiny. We all know is a good thing, and that I think is an important part of it. And you've set some sort of informal sort of like targets of where you need to make improvements. So I think it is really important, and it does give everybody a voice, and as I think Deputy Labey said, to be part of that international conversation. So we're, as the UK, trying to use the G7 presidency that we have at the moment as well to have a gender advisory council. So it makes you aware of international comparators as well.
Yeah, so a very positive step from Jersey's perspective in terms of a real sort of moving the dial forward, actually, in terms of from what we're hearing and seeing. And Your Excellency, in terms of what would you like to add in terms of the Baroness's comments, in terms of how CEDAW's really helped to progress and move the dial forward?
I think it provides clarity. So even for countries that maybe had the political will, now they have a structure. And I think it's also that, right? Removing any gray area. It is clear, it's a treaty, apply it, embrace it, and do even more than what the treaty requires.
Thank you. And Mr. Nastic, in terms of when we're talking about this framework for CEDAW and sort of providing like a toolkit, some guidelines in terms of what we can follow, how does CEDAW work alongside other human rights treaties, such as the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? Thank you.
Well, CEDAW and the Convention on the Rights of the Child are 2 out of 9 core human rights treaties. The 2 of them are actually very strongly connected in many ways. Number one, there is a great overlap between the 2 conventions, so they reinforce each other. Number 2, each one of these conventions has some points where it goes further than the other one and addresses a concern that the other one does not. For instance, the CEDAW Convention is very strong when it comes to the issue of forced marriage. The Convention on the Rights of the Child does not have any explicit reference to that. On the other hand, the Convention on the Rights of the Child has gender equality throughout the whole of the convention. It also has very strong provisions about gender equality when it comes to joint responsibility of parents in upbringing their children, and it also has a provision about the obligation of states to provide prenatal and postnatal support to women in their maternal role. So the 2 conventions are complementary and mutually reinforcing. And this is the reason why the 2 conventions have always underpinned everything UNICEF does, because we think that there is a linkage between the realization of the rights of women and girls and the rights of the child. And you can see it actually in our logo, which has the image of a mother and a child. And so the 2 conventions are important for our everyday work, but also for our engagement in the monitoring process, where we work together with the UN Committee on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women in Geneva. And I would like to invite all of you here, stakeholders who work for the cause of women's rights, to use the CEDAW Convention as an instrument for change. And please do engage in the reporting process when it comes next in 2023, when the government of Jersey is going to report. I would also hope that the government of Jersey, once the situation is right in the future, will follow the suit of the UK government and also ratify the optional protocol to the convention, CEDAW Convention, because it is another great practical tool on achieving further change. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, it really is wonderful, isn't it, in terms of when we're hearing all of these insights and some of the challenges there's been for some of the ladies that we saw on the video, just on your own experiences, how CEDAW and all of these other treaties do really provide this very strong framework. It provides a roadmap for us going forward, and that really is key, isn't it, in terms of a framework within which society can really sort of look to. And that leads me very much on to the last section for this panel discussion today, which is how can CEDAW be used to drive forward positive change in Jersey? Deputy Labey, can I go to you first in terms of how do you think CEDAW can contribute to the work? I mean, we've heard some really positive work that's been done in the schools, which is really fabulous to hear. But how do you think that really can add to what we've already been doing from an island perspective?
Well, as Dragos has alluded to, it provides a framework and an international framework where we can measure our standards on an international level. But as well as making it better for women and children in the island and promoting awareness and using it as a tool to achieve these better international standards. I mean, internationally, Jersey's reputation surely looks far better when we've adopted something like CEDAW to the outside world. So it promotes us on an international level as well as making things better for women and children in the island.
Because, I mean, it's been really positive as well to hear in terms of your own parish, in terms of Grooville School, hasn't it? In terms of this gold award from the UNCRC. I mean, that really is a gold star. It's a real, again, it's a role model. It's something that, you know, everybody can look to try and emulate in terms of approach.
Yeah, that's it. It's a wonderful award. And I see Louise Doublé, she had a part to play in introducing it at Grooville School when she was there. But we've been working on it. It runs through the ethos of the school, weaves through everything they do. And yeah, it's a wonderful thing. You go to Grooville School and those children will tell you exactly what their rights are. It's quite unnerving to begin with, but it's marvellous.
Perhaps a little bit different from when you and I were that age,
yeah,
possibly.
Absolutely.
But it's a positive to hear, though, isn't it? And Deputy Martin, what's your thoughts from a local perspective in terms of how you really think that CEDAW can contribute to all this good work that we're already doing from an island perspective?
Well, I think it's another tool in our box. We need to literally, we've adopted it, but we need to follow it through in everything we do. As I said, I know we're very early days on the new family friendly and a year each for each parent, and extended the maternity benefits. But I'm working closely, again, that was a backbencher's, Deputy Doublé brought a proposition to make sure that I'm looking at this all the time, like 2 years. It's so early because it only just came in, but you know, it's is it right? Is it set right? Are the right people able to take it? Is there enough money, etc., etc., etc. But and now working as well, because I know employers have been brilliant in the COVID and working from home and the flexibility, and I want to see much more of that. You, if you can do your job, you can do your job and you do it at home. You know, it's one of those.
So again, it's a real positive, because it's actually not just a sort of paying lip service on an agenda. It's there. It's all the time, isn't it? It's something that everybody's got that focus on in terms of how to drive forward change and move the dial. Now, as we start to conclude this panel session before we go to the audience for questions, I'd like to sort of go to each panel member. If I could start with you, Baroness, please, first, in terms of what advice or comment do you have for Jersey in terms of as we move forward? What's your strap line, as it were, in terms of your message? Thank you.
I mean, I would just harness the opportunity. I always find it a bit difficult commenting on other people's perspectives, but one of the things I do want to add is for Jersey and for us all, actually, CEDAW is really important because it's a framework of standards for each nation state. But one of the biggest challenges we've got in this space is social media, which goes across nation boundaries. So it's so important. And I think Jersey, now they've signed up, can also help us in terms of how to ensure that women are treated well online, as well as in all of the other environments that you've spoken about.
Thank you. Mr. Nastic, can I turn to you next, Dragan? Thank you.
Jersey has achieved a lot. 3 years ago, Jersey passed an excellent piece of legislation setting up the Office of the Children's Commissioner for Jersey. Actually, the CEDAW Convention and other UN human rights treaties, in addition to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, are part of her remit. But as other colleague panelists have mentioned, realization of human rights, it's a journey, a never-ending journey. So I encourage the government of Jersey to continue with that journey. My recommendation would be, now that there is a growing number of UN human rights treaties that you have ratified, it would be good to set up a coordinating mechanism to ensure that your engagement with the human rights system under the auspices of the United Nations is a success, because you have so much actually good news to report, but there's also, as you acknowledge, further progress to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Deputy Labey.
Well, as I said in my speech, I believe that economically and socially empowered women are the prime movers in the success of a country. So we need to keep the momentum going.
Keep the wheels turning.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes. Your Excellency.
I can only add that it's like for all of us is listening to women's voices. They have oftentimes the solutions, and just take them and support them in achieving those.
So really
those
provide
solutions.
that support platform
Just
for girls coming through to realise they've got that voice and to make sure they're not afraid to use it.
Indeed, to listen to them also in being part of the solution in the implementation phase.
Excellent, excellent. And Deputy Martin.
Well, I think I just want to carry on from where I started at my speech. I really, over the different elections in the last 21 years, we've been as little as, I think, 7 or 8 women states members, and we've got 13 now. But, you know, so there's certain boards you all need to fill, and you need to be on. And you, some lady on the, I think her name was Helen, said she was lucky her states member was a woman and she could talk to her because she was a woman. I don't know what the issue was, but we need more women. I really say again, it's a fantastic, flexible job. You are your own boss. Yes, you have to be in the States when the States sit, but the 75% of the job is reading and research, and you can do that at home. You know, even if the children are sort of running around, it's not good, but it can be done. So I really want the 13 to turn into a minimum of 20, and that's at least a third of us in the next election. So I think that would be a really...
Sounds a good focus for us all, doesn't it?
It'd be a brilliant step forward. And I don't know if people don't actually understand the job. Speak to any of us, I can tell you all the good points about the job. It's fantastic. It really is. And if you've got a young family.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, and the audience on live stream, we're delighted that we've got quite a few questions coming through on Slido. But before I go to those questions on Slido, are there any questions from the floor that anybody would like to put forward? Kate.
Thank you so much. That was so fascinating and really inspiring. I'm just really interested to understand what our government can do in terms of practical next steps to ensure that CEDAW has the impact it should have. What are the sort of next steps that government should be looking at to support it?
Deputy Martin, should I turn to you perhaps first on that one?
Yeah.
And to Deputy Labey.
Well, as I said, everything we do, we must make sure that, you know, we're looking at CEDAW, and are we fulfilling the structure and the outline. I think we only signed up in February, wasn't it? February this year. So it's very early. Does mean that, you know, and then we will get... So I'm hoping that you'll come back, I think Dragan said in 23, late 20, and see that we have progressed. It's got to be on everything we do, you know, unconscious bias and looking at all different things, you know, so make sure that you're not biased against women in certain jobs and things like that.
Thank you. And Deputy Labey?
Yes, well, we've got 3 conditions on signing up. So our first priority has got to be to look at the tax laws, which we are doing, domicile and inheritance. So those are 3 that we've got to focus on immediately. So there's all kinds of other initiatives that are taking place now, the LEAN programme, and as well as all the laws that are coming through. I mean, Judy, Deputy Martin, has alluded to the discrimination law that came through in 2013, sexual abuse, and the family-friendly this year. And there's more in the pipeline there with the law officers department. They would have come through a lot quicker had we not had a pandemic. But there are initiatives as well. And as Dragos said, I think coordinating all of that to ensure that there isn't duplication, to understand what the private sector are bringing to the table, and working in a collaborative way to really bring the island along.
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. Are there any other questions from the audience?
I guess it's linked.
If we could get the microphone to this lady there, that's super. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
It's linked with Kate's and Draga's comment about the need for a coordinated, because Deputy Labey's comment about economically and socially empowered women, I absolutely think is spot on. The concern, as always, is how do we ensure that's for all women across the board, because I think this is a fantastic, really important milestone. But there is always the danger that the people who are already socially and economically empowered will get more socially and economically empowered, and then we leave other people behind. So the idea of having some coordination and steps would be, I'd be really excited to see what that looks like.
So again, a very much a framework for the island in terms of so that we can follow that framework. Are there any other questions just before I move to the questions on Slido? This lady here, thank you.
So my question, I guess, is off the back of a couple of points that have been raised and that you've spoken about the importance of women's voices and all women's voices, I think, being heard. Is there going to be a public consultation about what the women of Jersey and the girls of Jersey would like to see focused on within that 3 years before we have to feed back into CEDAW?
I mean, I know, perhaps I can assist actually with that. I know certainly from, so IOD Jersey, we've been introducing the D&I Charter, and we've been very grateful for the support from government in relation to their collaboration on this. But we've also worked with a diversity network with Kate, also with Pippa, Sarah Garud, and the great team at Lean In, and also the Good Business Charter. So what we're trying to do, and also with Women Ed, we're trying to join the dots between us all, because we realise that by working collaboratively for the island, actually that we can push that dial forward. So I know that there's great work. Certainly, if you want to hear anything more, please do speak to Kate or to Pippa Davison, Sarah, myself, in terms of, and also from the government's perspective. There's been tremendous support from Richard Buchanan and Kate as well. Kate Nutt here, that's again today. So there's some really good work going on actually that we'd be delighted to unfortunately we haven't got sufficient time, but we can let you know. Are there any other questions? Some ladies at the back. Jennifer at the back there, thank you.
You went through a horrible genocide, and from then you have become world leading in terms of putting women and children forward. How did that happen? So what was it? Was it an enlightened guy at the head of government that decided that that was a good thing to do? Or how did that change? What was the pivotal point that made the journey for Rwanda so different?
Thank you. Yes, it was leadership. Right after the genocide, we had to pick up the pieces from a very difficult situation. And the leadership then, the president, said, well, we can't do it with only half of us working. We have to do it with the society at large participating. And women were then started to be given positions, powerful positions, leadership positions, and they performed. So we slowly started demystifying who needs to be at the top for work to be done. And also because we needed to unite the country at that time. And women naturally are unifiers, because we were very tired of division, and we needed those soft voices to be able to speak sense into very angry men. So it's the two sense. But I also go back to our tradition. Traditionally, women in Rwanda had their place in society. So it was just broken by colonialism and very difficult period right after independence. So I think it's something that was already in our society from before, but it certainly did take leadership to really take the steps. And because the success were quickly present, it became easier to embrace.
Thank you. There's another lady at the back, actually. Hi, Pomme.
Thank you. The key to the success of any policy is communication, and you've talked a little bit about education as well. My question is, how will you ensure that this convention is effectively communicated to all levels of Jersey society, rather than just being something that's limited to discussion amongst women's groups and the top levels of government?
Deputy Martin, would you like to fill that one?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, education. Now, I'm a mother of 2 boys and a girl, and I talk to my boys the same as I do my girl, and you tell them things, but they need to be in school being taught that it's not good to, your sister really, because they always used to think it was all right to tap the sister, but no, they're not. So it's all about educating, and as I said earlier, if somebody does have a really bad experience, and that would be sometimes a learnt experience in their own home, and they grow up to be an abuser, normally men, could be women, earlier on we must get to them and sort of retrain them, speak to them, and I say take the stigma out if they really want to become a better citizen. So, it's younger, more. I mean, in domestic violence, I heard what Pam said, but it goes across the social, rich, poor, middle. It doesn't discriminate.
Yeah.
So, some people just hide it better, and it's not good. So and it's not been. There's not been too much done, as I think you're saying. We do a lot of talking. And we need to do some really radical actions to, eliminate as much as we can.
Thank you. And Deputy Labey, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, perhaps. I think it's trying to reach out to the people that don't ordinarily engage in society for whatever reason. I mean, they wouldn't come along to events such as this. There is social media now, there's usual media channels, but I think we do need encouragement. As I said, I'm encouraged by what I see in schools, the confidence and the ability and of the children coming through the system, but it's a case of carrying it on. And Her Excellency and I were speaking before, it's the support mechanism needs to be throughout life, not just support people to get to jobs. It's supporting people when they take leave to maybe of years to bring up a family. How do we support them to come back into society, which I think, Patricia, you were asking about. So it's mentoring, support, groups, forums, social media.
It's that real support framework, isn't it, in terms of... I think you must all be psychic, actually, because quite a few of the questions that came through from the live stream on audience have been answered, actually, on Slido. So I'm very conscious of time and that everybody may be getting hungry. So I'd just like to conclude this really wonderful event, which really is a milestone for Jersey and a real celebration for us all. I think it's been incredibly helpful to hear from our panellists in terms of their own perceptions, and those ladies that's on the video, Women in Jersey. It's also been really good to discuss what these key challenges are, which do affect women and girls, not only in Jersey, but around the world. There's commonalities and similarities that we're certainly hearing from the comments this morning. but also what CEDAW has done to help progress gender equality over the last 40 years. It's a fabulous framework which we can really, really make use of in the island in terms of driving forward that positive change. A message from the video which really resonated with me when I saw it earlier this week was around inspiration. You can't inspire others if you don't have those role model or models to look to. And I'm sure, ladies and gentlemen, and our viewers on live stream, that you would all agree that today's panellists are very much those role models, and our sincere thanks to all of them. But also, we've got lots of other strong role models, those ladies that we saw on the video to begin with, in terms of promoting diversity and inclusion within the island. But I'd just like to make specific mention in terms of some of what I regard as the role models and the leaders locally, and that's men and women. I'm not one to sort of stereotype at all. I know that certainly when I came into the role of chair at IOD Jersey, and we talked about the areas of focus, D&I was one of the priorities. But what I did recognise was there's some really good work going on already within the island, and I said to the team, there's no point in us all duplicating. We're going to have more purpose, and we're going to drive this dial forward if we all collaborate. And with that in mind, I reached out to the fabulous team at Lean in Jersey, co-founded by Pippa Davison. I see Sarah Garoud's also in the room today. And also David Bailey of RBC has been a great support, as has Paul Cowshill in relation to that group. We also reached out to the Diversity Network, co-founded by Kate Wright. And again, Kate has been really instrumental locally in doing some really fabulous work, as has Paul Milbank, one of the founders of the Good Business Charter, and I've recently been delighted to join the board with him and others. But also I'd like to say sincere thanks to my own team at the D&I subcommittee of IOD, which is chaired by Julia Ann Dix. They have been behind the launch of the local IOD D&I Charter, which, as I've mentioned before, has been supported by government, and we really are grateful. But by working and going back to the questions from some of the ladies in terms of how we can all work together to really join the dots, what we've achieved, we only launched the D&I Charter just before lockdown in February of last year, and we've obviously had quite a challenging time in the last few months. But already I'm delighted that when I spoke to our branch officer yesterday, we've got over 90 businesses signed up locally to that vision statement, which is now becoming a charter. Those businesses range from very small businesses right through to the large corporates. So it's again going back to Dragan's point and the Baroness's point about having this framework, and this is why CEDAW and like the D&I Charter are really key from a Jersey perspective in terms of providing a framework to ensure that our society does indeed become diverse and inclusive. So I think collaboration really is key, and I very much agree with some of the comments which have been made on this. So sincere thanks to all of our panellists for all of their very valuable insights. It really is appreciated, and thank you also for travelling over to Jersey. It's great to see you here, and that you also brought the sunshine after the last few days. I'd like to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for attending today and for all of your feedback. Also to our viewers on live stream, and I'd like to wish you all a good long bank holiday weekend. Without further ado, I'd now like to close our panel session and invite everyone for some lunch. I understand the tables are being called up separately, and so I'll hand over to the wonderful staff at the Pomme D'or for that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.